More of our exclusive live event with former Vice President Joe Biden. As we've mentioned, he is the author of a new book called Promise Me, Dad.
He's also traveling around the country, launching what he calls his American Promise Tour to engage with everyday Americans on a whole host of different issues. And we're happy to say this is his very first stop. Mr. Vice President, good morning again.
You guys work too hard. I've been here all morning. You guys work too hard.
Yeah. We want to say that our first question comes from Jill from Delaware. It's nice to have you, Dr. Biden. Nice to see you as well. Hoda, why don't you get us started?
All right. We have in the front row, again, we have Republicans, Democrats, people from all walks of life. We have Brianna with a question about gun control.
Hello. So with the tragedy that just happened in Texas, my question is, how do you justify the Democratic view on gun control when the shooter was stopped by a man who was legally licensed to carry a gun?
Well, first of all, the kind of gun being carried, he shouldn't be carrying. Assault weapons are. I wrote the last serious gun control law that was written. It was law for 10 years, and it outlawed assault weapons and it outlawed weapons with magazines that had a whole lot of bullets, and so you can kill a whole lot of people a lot more quickly. Number one. Number two, it's just rational to say certain people shouldn't have guns. Now, the fact that some people with guns are legally able to acquire a gun and they turn out to be crazy after the fact, that's life. There's nothing you can do about that. But we can save a lot of lives, and we've stopped tens of thousands of people from getting guns who shouldn't have guns.
All right, we're going to move over here. We've got Jackie here from New York. Jackie's got a question about dealing with loss.
Good morning.
Hey, Jackie.
As a mother who've lost 2 kids to gun violence,
Oh, God love you.
what advice would you give to families and parents that are dealing with the pain and hurt of the loss of their children?
Mom, you're the very person I've been talking about. There's so many people out there who have suffered more than Jill and I have suffered, and get up every single day and just put one foot in front of the other. And my guess is you've done the same thing I've done. You looked at what your sons would be doing and what they cared about, and you're devoting your life to doing that. You know, I got a letter from Vicki Kennedy, Teddy Kennedy's wife, and after Teddy died of the same exact thing that Bo died of. And she said every time Ted would be down, he'd reach and grab a letter from the top drawer of the bureau that his dad wrote to a friend of his in 1954 who lost a beloved son. And remember, Ambassador Kennedy lost his son, Joe, in the war. And he said, John, he said, I'm really sorry. For the longest time, I asked why. And then because life goes on, one day I get up and I thought to myself, what would my son Joe be doing if he were still here? And I devoted myself to dealing with that. Maybe that's the reason for it all. Mom, God love you.
Thank you. God bless you.
You're a strong lady.
Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Carson?
Guys, we got the hashtag Biden today. If you'd like to ask a question, you can use that. And we've got one for you from Patricia that says, do you think your age will be a problem with voters in a presidential race? Switching gears.
Your birthday is next week, I might remind you.
I think my age is the problem with Jill. So I'm known as Jill's husband. Now, that's the first time she said that. Look, I think people have a right to ask about your age, your health. I think if anyone were to run for president, you should fully disclose your medical records. And right now, as my mother would say, knock on wood, I'm healthy, I'm in pretty good shape, but that's a way off. If we run, I think it's a legitimate issue for people to raise.
Yeah, I've got. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Sarah's got a question about President Trump.
Yep. I know this might be hard to answer. What is one thing, if any, that you believe he's doing well as president? And go Orange.
Well, all right, Syracuse. Well, I think there's a number of things that he's doing well, but even the things he's doing well, it's how he does them. David Brooks is one of my favorite columnists, and he wrote a piece, I think I mentioned to you, Matt, about there's this invisible moral fabric that holds up society, and people listen to what leaders say. And the kind of the way in which it it assumes a citizen who is engaged and decent and honorable and speaks with some degree of civility. And but I do think there are things he's doing well. I think he's, but it's more the tone of this administration that bothers me.
With all due respect, you haven't come up with one thing you think he's doing well yet.
Well, I think he married very well. I'm actually trying to think because there are. I can't think of something right now, but I'm not being a wise guy. But there's a lot of the country that's still functioning. For example, the choice of keeping the military personnel that we left behind in place in the Middle East was very, very important. He hasn't changed that policy, and he's continued that policy. I think he's doing that very well. I think he's pursuing the way in which we're beginning to try to organize the military. It's mostly the military men that are around him that I think have been the stable factors in the conduct of the foreign policy. A lot of bravado, but he hadn't changed a whole lot so far.
Real quickly, though, on the rhetoric, I mean, just over the weekend, there was an exchange of fire, so rhetorical fire between Kim Jong-un, who had called the president a lunatic and old, and then the president tweeted back, "You're short and fat." When you think about that in the context of two countries with nuclear weapons,
I just think in the context of just sort of common decency. I mean, it's not the way, when your children hear a president referring to anybody that way. I mean, our children are listening. I mean, these things matter, and it's just not an appropriate way. To me, Savannah, every president I've known, and I've known 8, they understand there's an obligation and a sense of dignity about the office. I've used the phrase a number of times. We are admired not just for the exercise of our power, but the power of our example. And it matters the way we conduct our discourse. It matters the way in which we talk. It matters the language, as David Brooks said, people are listening. Our leaders have impact on attitudes. And I just think it's a big mistake, and it's beneath the office.
I've got Sav here. Hey, Sav. You have a question for the Vice President?
Yes, sir. What was one of your favorite memories with former President Barack Obama in the office?
I guess one of my favorite memories was when we'd have lunch and talk about my granddaughter and his daughters. He coached my granddaughter's basketball team, and his daughter, his number 2 daughter, and my number 3 granddaughter, each other's best friends, and they play in the same team together. They've been going to school since grade school, and they're now in high school together. They vacation together, and I think I enjoyed most when we'd be in. We had lunch once a week, every week, and we'd sit down and talk about, and one of my favorite moments was we were watching the Final Four. We're sitting on the floor together, and he's a big basketball fan, as you know, and a player as well. And they came up to him and said, "I understand you coach your daughter's basketball team." He said, "Yes." He said, "I also coach the vice president's daughter. She's going D1." She's going D1. That's one of my favorite moments.
Do you and former President Obama ever talk now when things happen in Washington? And, for example, when you see some of his legacy and both of your legacies being unraveled and reversed by executive order, do you talk? Do you vent? Do you complain to one another?
Well, we don't complain, but we talk. We talk. We're always in contact with one another. We see one another still, and we strategize as to what we can do to help keep these things from happening. Like, for example, the health care bill. We both were engaged with the Congress and with others as to a strategy as how to prevent that from being unraveled, which it has been prevented from being completely unraveled, at least. And so, but in terms of, did you hear what he just did kind of thing? No, we're both realistic. We both know that the tone was set even before the president was sworn, before the present president was sworn in, that he was anything Obama was going to try to scratch. And but it's very calm.
Do you follow him on Twitter or no?
Yeah. I asked him to follow me on Twitter.
All right, I've got Kendra here with a question.
Jamie.
Oh, Jamie.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jamie.
Hi, Vice President.
Hi, Jamie.
So the 2016 election was for many Democrats a shocking wake-up call. What changes do you think the Democratic Party needs to make in order to be successful in 2018 and 2020?
Well, I want to point out, but for 172,000 votes, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And Hillary got 3 million more votes. I'm not saying he didn't win. He won fair and square by the Electoral College. That makes sense. So, but there was no landslide here, number one. Number two, I'm referred to in Washington the last 25 years as middle-class Joe. It's not meant as a compliment. It means I'm not sophisticated. I think there's real reason why a lot of middle-class people are legitimately concerned with digitalization, artificial intelligence, whether there are going to be jobs in the future. I spoke at the World Economic Forum. I was asked to speak about the fourth industrial revolution and will there be middle-class jobs. And so, for example, I was talking to one of the staff guys here today, cameraman, about truck drivers. And a guy who was a cameraman always wanted to be a truck driver. He's driving an 18-wheeler now. And I said, well, a lot of those guys are wondering whether they're going to have a job in 2, 5, 10, 12 years. Are they going to be able to make a living? So people are out there worried, and we don't talk enough to them. My dad used to have an expression. He said, I don't expect the federal government or the government to solve my problems. I expect them to understand it. And I think there are answers. In this last election, what happened was, because it was such a mosh pit in terms of Hillary's inability to be able to, not her, she tried, but to get the message out about the middle class, about what she was going to do about education, what she was going to do about child care, what she was going to do about these things. And the middle class is, I think we have to respond and let them know there's significant hope. We're better positioned than any nation in the world to own the 21st century. No, we really are. That's not hyperbole. And so I just think that we have to speak more directly to the legitimate concerns of the middle class, black, white, Asian. It's not just white, high school educated guys and women. It's across the board.
On that note, we have run out of time for this segment. Just an informal poll real quickly. Does it sound like he's running? Raise your hand.
If you missed it, he just did the sign of the cross.
Former Vice President Joe Biden. Vice President Biden, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks.
Thank you,
so
sir.
much. We
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
He's going to be back along with his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, for a conversation with Megyn Kelly in our next hour.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.